Hello. Now we are going to talk about the property decorator. As we have already seen in the last video, right? So the property is callable and it actually call itself. So property decorator return itself, right? Here is an example. Here we are using the property functions, right? As an fget function, we are creating a function as here we're getting a lambda function over here, right? Which just print getting property. That's it. When we see the property p object, we can see that it is a property object, right? And we can, in fact, this is the same property that was created, right? So this is the same property that we have created, right? Now let's see how the decorator work. Now in the decorator, we have the three function thing, right? So first we have the decorator function which takes the function as an argument. Now inside this decorator function, we define the inner function which changes some value and return the and call the function itself which was passed as an argument function over here. So this my decorator function just return the inner function, right? Here we define the inner function and return the inner function, and when you call the inner function, it call the function itself. So this is like three function problem we have, right? So let's run this. Now here is the this undecorated function we are getting, like this function we are getting. So this function will pass to this my decorator function over here, right? So here we are getting undecorated function which takes two argument and do a plus b, right? Now here to create a decorator, we'll use this my decorator function. Now we are passing this undecorated function over here as an argument, and this my decorator function will return the inner function which is defined inside the function itself, right? So this decorator function is itself the inner function. So but it has not been called. This inner function has not been called, so we have to call these functions. To call this function, here we are passing the argument, right? So this function takes the argument, so we are passing 10 and 20, so a and b, and now we can see that it has returned our original function, right? Here is the another function we have as an argument function. We are getting this my func, right? And now we are using this my func. Now this function, so we'll call this function has been decorated, right? Now we can also decorate our function using at the rate operator. We are saying at the rate my decorator to this my func, right? Now this function has been decorated. Now you do not need to kind of define this in a bit and then you have to call it. Now this my function is already got decorated. When you run this, you can see that it is like decorating function we are getting, right? So it's the same thing. And if you call the my function again, right? If you call the my function again by passing the parameter, because this function is decorated, so it will print the decorator output as well. So first it is printing running decorator function, and then it is printing running original function, and then it is returning a plus b. Now we know how the decorator function works, right? So the property callable create a property object and return itself, that we have discussed, right? So in other word, we could create our own property, right? So like over here we have this person, so we are creating a class. We have this init method, it takes this underscore attribute. So we have this underscore attribute. We have this name function inside the class, which return just attribute value. And then here we are getting a name property, right? By using the property function. Now this property function takes the function as an argument. So we are passing the same name as an argument over here, right? So let's run this. Now we have the name as a decorator. Now when we create the object of the class and when we do p.name, it is actually, this name is actually the property decorator, right? So now in this function, we have changed a bit. So instead of saying a name equal to property name, we are saying at the rate property, which is same as this, right? So instead of defining the property decorator and then calling it, we are using the decorator with the at the rate property decorator. It's the same thing, right? We have already discussed this earlier, right? So here we are defining the property decorator with the, so here we are defining the property function with the property decorator, right? And the function name is name, which return underscore name. Let's do this. When we create, we can access the name attribute. When we do p.name, it ultimately call this name function, right? Now the property object has some This property object has some properties like the setter, which basically accept the reference to the setter method and return itself. So here we are getting the property object. We are getting this property object, and when we try to check what is the other attributes which has, what are the other property which has available with this object, we can check with the dir function, and here we can see that all these function which also had the getter and the setter, right? So we have the setter as a property, right? So we can now register the setter method, right, using the setter callable and get our property back. So here we have the object. Now when we say p dot setter, we can call it, because this is the callable object, we can say p dot setter, and then we are passing the function. So now this is a setter function now, because this is a callable, so it also return itself, right? So this setter callable return itself. Now we are storing in a p2. Now when we check the id, both id are totally different, and it is okay, right? Because the p object has a getter property and the p2 object has the setter property, which ultimately define the different thing, right? Here you can do the same thing manually over here. Here we have the person, we have the name as a function. Now we are creating the property decorator over here with the name as a name, and now we are creating another symbol as a name prop. We are defining the name, and now we have this another name function which changes the value, and now we are using the same functions to call the setter and pass this function over here, right? And now we are saying this decorator. Now we are saying this property as a name, and now we are deleting this intermediate step. We are deleting this intermediate this variables over here. So this is one way. This is the manual way to doing or to setting the property, right? When we check person.dict, here what we see the name as a property decorator. We do not see two decorator, right? Because one of the things has been deleted, right? Now when we do create the object, when we check the p.name, so this is like getter method has been called, and when we do p.name and then you set the value, this is like setter method has been called, right? Now we can simplify our code this way. So instead of doing this manually, which is not a good approach, right? You can use this technique, right? So here this two function has been defined, name to get the value and the name function to change the value. And then first we create the property decorator for the name, right? So this is a property decorator now, and now this name itself return a new object we have already seen, right? So now we are using that object, which is the decorator now, which is the property object now. Now we are using the same name to set the setter. So now when we say name dot setter by passing this name function, so this setter name has both functionality, getter and the setter. So first we just add a getter functionality and then we add the setter functionality. And this is how the property decorator works, right? Now when we check person.dict, we have only one property decorator, and now it works fine. So we have created the object. This is our getting the name and this is our setting the name. Now let's see what happens if we have used the same name. We have used this name over here, we have used the name over here. But what happens when we use a different name? Here in this definition, this returns you the name decorator with ability to get the value. This returns you the full name decorator with the ability to set and get the value both, right? This is how things are, right? So if you do not give the same name, so what happens is, so let's see that when we see the person.dict, now we are seeing that we have the two property decorator, right? So this name only has a ability to access the value, and this full name has ability to access and set the value both, right? So as we can see, when we create the object, we can say p.name, we can say p.full name. It will also give you the same, because this full name has also the ability to get the value. This is because we have not given the same name over here, right? Now when we say p.full name as Raymond, now it has ability to change the value. But when we say p.name as Guido, So here we are trying to change the value of the name attribute with the help of name properties. This will not work, right? So technically, this property callable has both getter and the setter method. So we can create the setter first and then add the getter. We can do that. But since the first argument of the getter is the first argument of the property is getter, right? So if you have to only create a setter function, so what you have to do is first you have to, so here is the function. First we are creating the empty property object, and now we are using this same object to add the setter functionality. When we do this here, now we cannot, here this has ability to change the value, but this does not has ability to get the value. When we try to create the object, we can get the dict. When we say dict, we have this name attribute. Now when we say p dot name as a Raymond, we have changed the value. Again we can check the dict. So the name has been changed, but when we say p dot name directly accessing the value will get error. And this is good if you have to do only the, like if you have to create only write only the attribute, right? So like if you have to only create this write only behavior of the property object, but this is just as an examples we are creating, right? Now let's create a property decorator which has both ability of read and write. So here we can do this way as well. We are saying this name as a property. So first we're getting the property object. Now we're saying name dot setter. This is the function to set the value. Name dot getter. This is a function to get the value, right? So you can also do this way, right? When we do this, now we have this p dot name as an Alex. Now we can see that p dot name we are changing, and then we can see the value, right? Now we can also go, like we can also use this delete, but we'll work on that later on, right? Lastly, we see how to add the docstring using the property callables. Here, we have seen that here we have this name method, right? And now we are defining the docstring inside the name functions. When we do so, when we check this person.name help, it will give you this docstring, which was defined in the getter method. This was a getter method. When we say help of person, we'll see that we have this name, and then we can see this docstring is available. So what happens if we have to set, if we only have to create a setter method only? So here we have this getter method, now we have this setter method. Now we are applying the docstring into the setter method. We are not applying the docstring into the getter method. If we do so, when we check the help.name, there is no value over here. Even with the help function, we can see there is no docstring. So if you set the docstring into the setter method, that will not work, right? But if you want, so before creating the property, like inside this, when you create the property object, here you can set the docstring as a write only the property, right? So this is the docstring which will be applied to this property decorator, which is for setter. And now we are using this setter. Now when we see person.name, now we can check the documentation, right? So this is it. This is all about the decorators, and specifically this property decorator, right? And this is, thank you very much.